Okay, that's University Hall at the University of Montana. The Grizzlies, the Grizz. As a lot of western towns, they put a big letter for the first letter of the name of the town. So, Missoula. By the way, that's an erratic. That rock in front of me, dropped by a glacier. Probably floating in Lake Missoula. And when the ice melted, it just dropped to the bottom. Again, the amazing thing is, the reason I'm here is, again, it takes, with this light, it's hard to see. But 3/4 of the way up, or all the way up to almost the M, are shorelines of Lake Missoula. What Lake Missoula was a lake that was formed by a massive glacier that came down and bottled up the valley, so the rivers couldn't leave. So a huge lake formed behind the glacier. Over time, when the glacier started to retreat, the ice got weak and the ice busted, releasing all this water. They say that they think this happened time and again, maybe up to 40 times. And this massive release of water rushed out toward the Pacific Ocean, went over eastern Washington, made the Scablands, down to the Columbia River, clear out into, I believe it made it, clear into Salem. So you can check me on that, Sandy. But I think that's the case. And like I said, this flood, rather than the Bonneville flood, which only happened once, the Missoula flood happened repetitively as the ice came and went. I was thinking about doing, you can see that switchback leading up to the M, but since it's in the 90s, I'm thinking better of it. So I think it's one of my wiser decisions. Okay, since I'm at the University of Montana, found a nice shady spot. It's a Saturday, summertime, no students around. Let's talk about the Missoula Flood. The Great Lake Missoula was formed when a continental ice sheet, or the continental ice sheet at the time, came down from Canada and formed an ice dam several thousand feet deep in the panhandle of Idaho, blocking any drainage from that area. It blocked off the Clark Fork River in particular, which was a pretty large river. So the combination of the river blockage, rain, the melting glacier, glaciers melting out of the mountains, a lot of water was produced. The lake got to be over 200 miles long and was about the overall amount of water of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario combined. The problem was, ice was holding back all this water, and when the ice sheet retreated or got weaker, the ice dam broke up, and all that water was released in a couple of days, like 60 miles an hour, washing down through Idaho into Washington State, down the Columbia River, toward Salem. So I spent 10 days or so in eastern Washington. I went to several of the Great Coulee and the Scablands in eastern Washington, and that was all caused by that massive amount of flooding from the ice sheet breaking. They figured like 500 cubic miles of water. 2,000 feet deep is how deep that thing was. So you can imagine that caused a lot of devastation. The thing about it is, it didn't happen just once, it happened numerous times. So that's why the eastern Washington is such a wasteland. All this topsoil was all washed away. So it's quite a story. And that's it.
This sculpture was especially poignant for me in that I could have been that lost soldier in the Vietnam War. I was able to have a great life while many in my age group were denied that.
Okay, this is the Grand Coulee Dam, which was finished in 1941. In the 1930s, during the Depression, President Roosevelt commissioned the dam to be built as a work project to spur on the economy. As it turned out, when World War II broke out, this dam was important in providing power for our industry. So that worked out pretty well. The salmon have suffered, but what can you say? A coulee, that term, it basically is a wide valley. What happened? This valley through here is really not caused by the river. It's too wide, and the banks are too sharp. So what happened between 14 and 28,000 years ago during the Ice Age, the glacier formed a huge dam up in Montana and formed a gigantic lake up there. When the glaciers were receding, the ice dam broke and all that water shot down through here and basically took away all the rock in this valley. The rock was pre-cracked. Basalt, whenever it cools, forms cracks like in columns, and because of that, it's easily eroded away. So all that water came down and washed all this rock away and made these big wide valleys. So again, there's different kinds of valleys. Some valleys which are more V-shaped are formed by rivers. Kind of a U-shaped is a glacier can form a valley by pushing out the rocks. And then a coulee is done in a dramatic event like that massive flood. So, that's your lesson for this morning. Okay, this is Baker Lake. Now, this lake normally wouldn't be here. The way it works, the Grand Coulee Dam on the Columbia River takes the water from their dam and pumps it uphill at 1 billion gallons a day into Lake Baker. And that goes into the Grand Coulee. So whenever the flood went by, there was no river here, so it just was dry. So the government used that flat valley as a place to store all this water for irrigation. And they irrigate an area about the size of Rhode Island. So this area has very little rain, so that they only get like, I think, 4 to 6 inches a year. So the farmers wanted this dam built for that reason. So in 1951, they finally got the pumps and got this lake filled up, and they've been irrigating ever since. The dam was done in 1941, so it took 10 years, but that was because World War II happened, and it was more important to produce power than it was irrigation. So they supplied power for the Boeing plant to build airplanes, also a plutonium plant for the atomic bomb, and several other aluminum plant in Spokane. So anyway, pretty amazing. This normally dry coulee is filled up with water, and if they didn't pump water into it, it would go back to being dry. Okay, this is by far the best view of what they've done here. This is the coulee, the Grand Coulee, as a matter of fact. On the left and right, you can see the steep vertical slopes there, made of basalt, which is pretty easily eroded. And after the glacial flood, this area was dry. There's no river through here. So the dam project used this flat area as a reservoir. So they've pumped all this water in here, and this goes on for miles. And communities along the way pump out the water for potatoes and just all kind of things. Apples, obviously, and pretty amazing. But again, there was no water here at all originally, except for that time of the big flood like 28,000 years ago. I guess there were several floods. You know, the ice dam would break and then it would reform, and the lake would fill back up, and then it would break loose again. And so over time, it eroded this area. This is pretty interesting. This is Dry Falls. And again, this is during the Ice Age floods again. The water came blasting over here, forming a big waterfall all the way across here. And of course, as it goes over the top there, it undermines underneath that soft basalt, that part right down there, and then the top part caves in. So this falls moved 15 miles upstream during the time of the flood. Shows what power nature has. 15 miles. Wow.